Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. On behalf of Strategic Vision Institute, I welcome you all at SVI webinar on NTI Index Report 2020. As per the program, the session will begin by the brief primer which will be presented by Ahyousha Khan. Ahyousha Khan is Senior Research Associate at SVI. She has done MPhil in Defense and Strategic Studies from Radioactive University and BS from Fatima Jinnah University. The primer will be followed by the views of distinguished panel for today's discussion. Now let me introduce to our speakers. Our first speaker for today would be Ambassador Zamir Akram. Ambassador Zamir Akram is currently advisor to the Strategic Plans Division, Government of Pakistan. He has served as Pakistan's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva from 2008 till 2015. He has held various diplomatic assignments in Pakistan's mission abroad. These include Washington, Moscow, Geneva, New Delhi, and Nepal. He has dealt with key issues including Afghanistan, nuclear non-proliferation, arms control and disarmament, UN reforms, human rights, and counterterrorism in his career. He holds a master's degree in international relations from London School of Economics and Political Science. He has also served as honorary dean of the Geneva School of Diplomacy during 2010, where he was awarded an honorary doctorate. Today, he will be presenting his views on NTI Index, a critical analysis. Our second speaker for today's discussion would be Dr. Zafar Jaspal. Dr. Zafar Jaspal is professor at School of Politics and International Relations at Radioactive University, Islamabad, nuclear, missile proliferation, national security, Pakistan, foreign and strategic affairs, etc. Dr. Jaspal as guest speaker, visiting lecturer, had delivered and still continues to deliver lectures at many professional and training institutions, including distinguishing NATO Defense College, Rome, Italy, Center of Excellence, Defense Against Terrorism, Ankara, Turkey, National Security and War Courses of Pakistan's National Defense University, Intelligence Bureau Academy, Command and Staff College, Quetta, Air War College, Karachi, and Foreign Service Academy of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Pakistan. He holds PhD and MPhil in International Relations and MA in Political Science. He did advanced postgraduate certificate courses in peace and conflict studies from European Peace University, Stuttgart, Austria, Peace and Foreign Policy Analysis from Oslo University, Norway. He also did CMC training course cooperative monitoring from Sandia National Laboratories, Albuquerque, New Mexico, United States. Dr. Jaspal is widely published scholar with more than 110 academic research papers. He recently authored a book called India's Surgical Strike Stratagem, Brinkmanship and Response. He participated as speakers in more than 250 national and international seminars, conferences, workshops, group meetings, etc. He also provides frequent expert commentary on international and local electronic media, for example, BBC, Voice of America, Russia TV, PTV World and News, Pakistan Radio, Al Jazeera, Al Arabia, Press TV, local TV channels, etc. Today, he will be presenting his views on assessing Pakistan's improved status in nuclear realm and future prospects. Before we proceed further, I would like to mention that this webinar will be conducted in the form of panel discussion during which each speaker will be given 15 minutes. If anyone is having trouble in hearing or viewing the webinar or is having any form of connectivity issues, please do mention this in chat and we shall try our best to address these issues from our end. Kindly note that by default, mic support attendees will be on mute and only panelists will be allowed to use mic and video. If anyone from audience would like to ask a question, they are requested to kindly use the chat option to type out their question. Please do include your name as well as your organizational affiliation along with your questions. The question will be then presented to our panel by moderator during question and answer sessions accordingly. While we fully encourage you to participate, we request to please be brief in your questions. We shall try our best to ensure that all questions get answered within our allotted time. Please further note that all opinions voiced at SVI platform are independent opinions of the speakers and audiences and not the official policy of the SVI. This is an open house activity which will be reported in media. If anyone would like to tag or post screen grabs of this event on their personal blogs, web pages, or social media, please do not forget to mention that the webinar was organized by the SVI. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema to give his welcome and introductory remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sher Bano. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On behalf of the Strategic Vision Institute, I'm very pleased to extend a very cordial welcome to all the participants of this webinar on the NTI Index Report 2020. I'm also very pleased to extend a cordial welcome to our two distinguished panelists. Ambassador Zamir Akram, who needs no introduction, neither in Pakistan nor abroad. He is an ambassador, well known at the international level. And our second panel distinguished panelist is Dr. Zafar Jaspal, who is a professor at the Square in Qadir University, Islamabad. He's also internationally recognized analyst and professor of international relations. We are very grateful to these two distinguished panelists to be kindly available to us on this very timely webinar on the NTI report 20, Index Report 2021. I think first of all, we'll request Ambassador Zamir Akram to give us a critical analysis of the NTI Index Report, and then we request later on Professor Zafar Jaspal to speak on Pakistan's improved status in the realm of nuclear and the future prospects on Pakistan's subject. I would like to say one or two words very briefly about the NTI Index Report. As we know, NTI is an NGO. This is a part and parcel of the US Department of Atomic Energy, Nuclear Threat Initiative as it is known. It is an institution, an international institution. It does not have the kind of status which the United Nations organizations like have as the Council on Disarmament or other such governmental bodies. It does not even have an equivalent status like the Nuclear Suppliers Group, because that is represented by the governments of the 44 countries which are members of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Anyway, it's an important institution which issues reports on various subjects, which will be known during a primer presented by Ahyousha Khan, who is a senior research associate at the SVI. And then we hope that we will have a very rounded discussion on the subject, that what exactly the NTI Index Report wanted to achieve, what are its objectives, what are its aims, and what does it want to go about that, and what is its modus operandi to address various issues at the international level. And after that, we'll have Dr. Zafar Jaspal to give us where Pakistan stands in the perspective of this NTI Index Report. I will first request Ambassador Zamir Akram to kindly present his views on, give us a critical analysis of the NTI Index Report. Ambassador Zamir Akram, over to you, please. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema, for subject. Let me, since I am speaking on the NTI index, to give a critical analysis of this, let me begin by giving a bit of the background of the NTI. As you said, the Nuclear Threat Initiative is a non-governmental, non-profit, and non-partisan organization, which was set up in 2001 by Senator Sam Nunn of the US. And the driving force behind this organization was the post 9/11 concern about the non-state actors or terrorists acquiring nuclear or biological materials which could be used to carry out a terrorist attack or attacks against the US or its allies, and also worldwide. In the beginning, of course, there was concern also particularly about the so-called loose nukes of the former Soviet Union after its disintegration. But after 9/11, the unstated but quite obvious concern arose as a result of the allegations about nuclear weapons or nuclear materials falling into the hands of terrorists in Pakistan. This concern was underscored or given or based on the fact that some of our nuclear scientists had met with Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders. I'm talking about Bashiruddin Mahmood. And then, of course, the unraveling of the AQ Khan network. So together with these factors, the unstated focus of the NTI was on Pakistan. Then in 2012, when the Obama administration started the Nuclear Security Summit process, in conjunction with that process, the NTI started producing this nuclear NTI's index, which Nuclear Security Index, which is produced on a biennial basis from 2012 onwards. It measures the status of actions taken by countries to protect nuclear materials. And I would then now briefly talk about the methodology of how this is done. The NTI index is prepared by a panel of experts. One of those experts is one of our prominent former SPD officials, Feroz Hassan Khan. And it is based also on public information that is publicly available, as well as data that is voluntarily provided by countries. There are three benchmarks that are used to measure this index. The two of them relate to theft, which is theft of security measures that have been taken by 22 countries that have 1 kilogram or more of weapons usable nuclear materials. Then there is the theft support global efforts, which is a ranking of 153 countries with less than 1 kilogram of nuclear materials or no usable nuclear materials. And the third category or benchmark is the sabotage, protection of facilities against sabotage, which is a ranking of 46 countries with or without weapons usable materials, but which have nuclear facilities such as nuclear power reactors, etc. So these are the three benchmarks on which countries are scored on a scale of 0, which is the lowest mark, to 100, which is the highest mark. And what is measured in all three of these benchmarks are the quantities and sites of nuclear-related materials or nuclear production facilities, the security and control measures adopted by countries, the adherence to global norms relating to security, a measurement of the risk environment, then domestic commitments and capacity. Now, let me say a few words about the NTI's index of 2020. The primary finding of the 2020 report is that the commitment to nuclear security has been declining, and there has been a clear decline, according to this report, since 2018. The reason that is given is perhaps the absence of the driving force that was provided by the Nuclear Security Summit process, which ended, as you know, as well as the new elements of instability that have come out that the international community is facing today, such as cybersecurity, and as now more recently, the impact of the COVID pandemic. The report argues that a number of countries have not shown the same kind of commitment to nuclear security as was done in the past. The allocation of funds to the IAEA has dropped. The political commitment to the work of the IAEA has also dropped according to the report, and that measures that were needed to be taken for containing the production of nuclear materials has also not been as effective as it had been in the past. The report, from our perspective, is most important due to the ranking that is given to Pakistan as registering the greatest improvement in its nuclear security efforts. And this is something that is a recognition of the efforts that have been made by Pakistan over the years to improve its nuclear safety and security architecture, its regulatory machinery, and also its willingness to demonstrate greater transparency in in the measures that it has been taken. But let me now come to the critical analysis. First and foremost, I think we should all recognize that the scoring system, and I've given a very brief study of what the scoring is, but the scoring system is complicated because it depends on the scoring of issues that are not really quantifiable. That's one of the things. And because of that, the security index process is that it tends to be highly subjective. Because of the panel of experts, which we hope are taking an objective assessment, but I will give you some examples as to show how this is subjective. The third point is that the NTI index does not override the responsibility of states for nuclear security. Safety and security remains a national responsibility, and that it cannot be handed over to any non-governmental or any other extraneous organization. Now, to highlight my point about the subjectivity of the report, for instance, if you see the report and compare the findings for Pakistan and India, India has given higher marks for elements such as political stability, governance, and international legal commitments. In fact, some of the numbers are very high. In fact, for political stability, they have scored 70, whereas Pakistan scores something like 15. Now, this is highly subjective, as I said, because we all know that if we look at the situation objectively in India, it can hardly be described as a country which has political stability, for reasons which I will not go into right now, but we are aware of that. Same is the issue of governance, and particularly with the issue of international commitments, where Pakistan's record is at least as good, if not better, than that of India. So international commitments are also a subject on which India has given higher marks. Overall, however, if you see the overall ranking, Pakistan is still higher than India. It's out of the 22 countries with nuclear materials, it is 19, whereas India is at 22, and India is only above Iran and North Korea. So had there been a more objective scoring, I think Pakistan's score would have been higher, and we would have been at a higher level in terms of our nuclear security measures. This improvement in Pakistan's ranking, as I said, is due to the measures that we have already taken. And these include safety and security measures for physical security, for our regulatory architecture, and as I also said, for our transparency on this subject. Still, the fact remains that Pakistan remains a country that is always under scrutiny. And particularly in the Western media, think tanks, Pakistan continues to be labeled as a country whose safety and security of its nuclear facilities is not guaranteed, despite the fact that uh, our position is higher than another country, India, which is given a very high record, or at least its record and performance is not questioned. And this is also used, this kind of allegations are also consistently being used, for instance, in denying Pakistan membership of the nuclear suppliers group, which, as you know, India has acquired a waiver for civilian nuclear activities. So despite our better record and our improvement in our record, this has not translated into effective recognition and support for Pakistan being given either a waiver for civilian nuclear cooperation or for its credentials to become a member of the nuclear suppliers group. I think for these reasons, while we should welcome the latest report's findings, recognition of our efforts, but we should not give this report a kind of status that it becomes the benchmark for determining Pakistan's performance. As I said, it is a national responsibility, and we do not recognize any other entity to comment authoritatively, to have the final word, the gospel truth about Pakistan's nuclear security measures. So we need to use this report in a cautious way, particularly in order to ensure that it is not seen as an endorsement of its overall findings, of its overall activities, because in 2020 they have recognized this. But as I said, it is subjective. In the future, you may see some different kind of findings. So we need to treat the results of the 2020 report with some caution, recognizing and underscoring that this remains a national responsibility for Pakistan. Finally, I think we also need to be very clear and careful that if we start endorsing without question the NTI's reports, that would give rise to other countries arguing for instance, the need for Pakistan to stop production of fissile material. Also, it can be used as an argument for seeking greater intrusiveness into our safety and security procedures, which is a national, as I said, a national and independent responsibility in which we cannot surrender to anyone else. So these are my comments regarding the overall report, and I would be happy to take any questions in any specific area that people may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Zamir Akram, for a very comprehensive, for a very elaborate and a very candid analysis of the NTI report. I really appreciate the critical part of it, and I fully agree with you that this report cannot be accepted as a gospel truth by Pakistan, particularly when it's not very objective in terms of a comparison between India and Pakistan. India is always being considered as a strategic ally by the United States of America, and this report has some reflection into that as well. Well, Ahyousha, I forgot about you. You should have reminded me, or Sher Bano should have reminded me. I just forgot to give you the turn that you have a very important primer to be presented on this very subject. So
Sorry,
I'm very sorry for that. I'm not ashamed of that, accepting that I forgot about it. So you can now present your primer on the subject. Okay, Ahyousha, please go.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Dr. Cheema. Today I will be giving presentation on NTI Nuclear Security Index, which is a report published by Nuclear Threat Initiative. I will just give a brief overview of the what this report is and what methodologies it used. NTI Nuclear Threat Index 2020 is the title as the losing focus in a disordered world. The NTI Nuclear Security Index is an international assessment and tracking of nuclear security conditions in a country around the world. It is published by a private think tank. It's not obligatory for government. It claims to promote actions to strengthen nuclear security. It is researched by Economist Intelligence Unit. Moreover, it claims that it gathers data from the publicly available information, such as national laws and regulations, treaty databases, and other primary and secondary sources. Moreover, NTI claims that to formulate its report, it does not review on the ground security, but rather assesses national level actions. NTI, to enhance transparency in its report, it sent the pre-publishing documents to 49 countries with weapon-usable nuclear materials or nuclear facilities. However, only 27 countries responded to this pre-publishing document. Since 2012, the NTI index is published biannually. This year, the fifth of this series is published. The ranking system of the Nuclear Security Index 2020 is basically based on three rankings. Two of the rankings are of the theft category and one is of the sabotage. In fifth edition, the first of its kind radioactive source security assessment is also added this year. The theft of the secure materials ranking is a ranking of the 22 countries basically, and to assess actions to secure nuclear materials against theft. The NTI index use weapon usable material definition as highly enriched uranium and separated plutonium. The theft of the sport global effort is the ranking of the 53 countries in Taiwan with less than 1 kilogram or no weapon usable nuclear materials to assess actions to support global nuclear security efforts. The sabotage category was firstly added in 2016 in the NTI's Nuclear Security Edition and since then is part of this report. Sabotage category assesses the security of the nuclear facilities against sabotage in 46 countries and Taiwan. The term nuclear facility refers in the report as the nuclear power reactors, research reactors with 2 megawatts or greater capacity, reprocessing facilities, and spent fuel pools. The framework for the ranking is also explained by the ambassador Zamir Akram is how NTI actually measures its security conditions in a country. It basically is same in 5 categories with slightly differences. It includes the assessment of quantities and sites, quantities of material, the number of sites, and the frequency of transport in a particular country. Assessment of quantities and size and sites is not included in theft second category, and it's only included as assessment of sites in the third category. Security and control measures, it includes indicators of physical protection, control and accounting, insider threat prevention, security during transport, response capabilities, cyber security, and security cultures. It is not part of the second category of the NTS report. Global norms include important international legal commitments that countries make, voluntary participation, uh, international initiatives in nuclear security information circulars. Domestic commitments and capacity includes NTI claim to include the extent of the UNSCR 1540 implementation by the countries, the status of the legislation of the implementation of the CPPNM. Risk environment, however, includes contextual factors such as political stability, effective governance, corruption, illicit activities by non-state actors that can affect the country's ability to implement effective security and regulatory oversight. The recently NTI report added one new category in its report. This report, however, does indexing of this category is different because there are no position given in this. This is the radioactive source security assessment. The methodology does not involve the in-depth country research as well. However, NTI claims that in future NTI may expand the assessment of the nuclear secures ranks and in more in-depth research in the radioactive source security assessment. The framework for the radioactive source assessment are also different from the other three categories. It includes national measures, global norms, commitment and capacity to adopt alternative technology, and risk environment. Pakistan was the most improved country in the theft ranking for countries with nuclear materials, improving its overall score by 7 points in the NTI 2020 index. NTI gave Pakistan 19th ranking out of 22 countries in the nuclear theft category. However, India is given as the 20th ranking this year. The majority of Pakistan's improvement are in the security and control category as by the NTI index, with 15th position in this subcategory and 25 points were added. Pakistan was also given 1 point in the global norms category in the subcategory of the theft category. Pakistan overall score in the sabotage category is 55 out of 100. With 33rd position, Pakistan improved its ranking by adding overall 5 points. For radioactive material security assessments, Pakistan do adhere to the IAEA Code of Conduct NTI report notes this year. Few general observations were also given by the NTI. First one is no countries have eliminated their stock of weapon usable nuclear materials since 2016, and the number of the countries with those materials has increased. Regulatory requirements for the nuclear security are not comprehensive. It is reported in this report. The rate of improvement has slowed and significant measures are also lacking in the nuclear security architectures of the state. With the exception of publishing regulations, countries' actions to build confidence in nuclear security, information sharing, and peer reviewing still remain limited, as reported by the report. With the exception of publishing regulations, countries' actions to build confidence in nuclear security through information sharing and peer reviewing remain limited. More countries are interested in acquiring nuclear technology for research or energy purposes, but 9 countries planning new power programs have varying level of preparedness to take nuclear security responsibility. Thank you so much. This is from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ayusha, for a very elaborate and comprehensive primer
Thank you so
on
much.
the subject. I now request Dr. Zafar Jaspal. I can't see him on the panel. I hope he puts his video on and I can see him on the panel. So over to Dr. Zafar Nawaz. Welcome, Dr. Jaspal. How are you? So
Thank you
please
very
over
much,
to
sir.
the subject.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Professor Cheema, providing me this opportunity to speak on this issue, NTI report. Of course, we are missing your conference room and other activities, but still something is better than nothing. And sooner, hopefully, we will start meeting again in your conference room or as well as in your other activities. But anyway, it's very timely UCAN's work, and Ambassador Zamir and Ahyousha has already given us many details. And I built my argument on the basis of these details. Let me start by saying nuclear theft, sabotage, and radiological material, or what we call it, nuclear and radiological terrorism, which was the basis of this report, or as it was pointed out earlier by Ambassador Saab, that these were the main issues which were discussed or debated in the 4 nuclear security summits. It's an important point when we take it as a national responsibility, because if there is a nuclear theft, if there is any sabotage or any missing of radiological material, then the problem is within the state rather than out of the state. So that's why we have to take such kind of the activities or recommendations very seriously, of course, officially without endorsing it. So my point is here very clear. I do not disagree with Ambassador Saab and Professor Cheema when they pointed out that whether we can endorse it, because there are some subjective sort of things, and I try to highlight them all. But in the beginning, we have to also keep in mind, when we critically examine Pakistan's national security policy, especially with reference to the nuclear infrastructure, nuclear material, first of all, we must be taken as a nuclear weapon state, where when you see all these, you can say, reports which have been generated in the United States or in the American-led Western world, they are not treating Pakistan as a nuclear weapon state. From the very beginning, there is a very interesting division. They have 5 nuclear weapon states, which they say de jure nuclear weapon states. One, India, which is their main, you can say, ally, and they are treating it as a de facto nuclear weapon state. And then they work over Pakistan, and the criticism starts. But anyway, when we focus on the report index, we find it that, of course, whatever Pakistan has taken measures in the last 2 decades, or especially 1.5 decades after the Ahyousha Khan network, you can say, disaster, we find it that this report has, and gradually Pakistan has improved a lot. Of course, when we are looking about these kind of the things, definitely Pakistan's what we call it Strategic Export Control Act, or our SEC division, and as well as our Center of Excellence on Nuclear Security, all have collectively contributed in developing or generating some kind of the positive atmosphere for Pakistan. Unfortunately, the international community has been ignoring all these, you can say, factors which Pakistan, or initiatives which Pakistan did at the domestic level and at the international level. When we have, for instance, on April 30, 2020, Pakistan submitted the 6th national report on the implementation of the 2004 United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540. Now here, when we look about this, as it has been already pointed out, that there are reasons behind it. That's why they granted some kind of the higher rating within the region to Pakistan. But I want to draw attention on a few other areas. Items, they have granted very low on this issue, Pakistan rating, that material production, elimination trend, they granted Pakistan a 0 number. It's an important point, Pakistan. That's why I was saying that when they talk about Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state. And nuclear armed states, all the nuclear armed states, whether they are member of the NPT or they are not member of the NPT, every state has been increasing its fissile material for the modernization of their nuclear arsenals. This is a trend. Whether you read the, what you call it, Americans, I mean this nuclear poster review released in February 2018, or you read the white paper of the Chinese, or you read the Russians' nuclear doctrine, or you see the Indians, or whatever estimate you find it. So expecting from a nuclear armed state and comparing it with the non-nuclear armed state, which is a member of the NPT as a non-nuclear weapon state, I think that is not a correct assessment. So, and second is, in the same kind, they say insider threat prevention. Here, we have a personal reliability program, we have a human reliability program. Now, we cannot take them inside. Now, here, as a nuclear weapon state, when they make a distinction between Pakistan's nuclear weapons program and civilian program, they judge or assess these kind of the arrangement on Pakistan's civilian program, which are under the IAEA safeguards. I was reviewing the literature and I came across that International Atomic Energy Agency has always expressed its satisfaction on our medical centers, on our what you call our nuclear power facilities, or even our agricultural research centers. So here, if they talk about that insider threat prevention, I think these are the areas where they have to, or the facilities where they are allowed to visit. If they are making an accurate judgment, you can say, draw an analogy that definitely at the nuclear sites which are not open to them, we are making more or better, or we are more cautious. Third important thing in this context is on-site physical protection. It's very interesting. On-site physical protection, how is it possible in a nuclear weapon state? Because on-site physical protection, we can manage for ourselves, and definitely nuclear weapons are we have a nuclear weapons program, an indigenous nuclear weapons program, and we are maintaining this nuclear weapons program since the last, you can say, 5 decades, and we have been thwarting all kind of the conspiracies theoretically and physically, whatever they anticipated, whether they were not able to implement or not, all these kind of the things. If we have managed to save that kind of things, then they must be, or you can say, confident that on-site inspection is not required. But despite that, they have to understand, if we are able to manage civilian nuclear program, and if they can judge that IA is giving us all the, you can say, kind of accepting our assurances that definitely our nuclear weapons program is more secure. It's more sensitive for us. And that is the area where we academically, I'm not talking about the government, but academically there's a need to highlight. And here I have to make for example, NTI, as it's a, Professor Cheema has rightly pointed out, it's a non-governmental organization. Similarly, like SVI, it's a non-profitable think tank. So there's a need to establish a dialogue between these kind of the think tanks and with them. And there we have to, you can say, further highlight and adopt a more proactive, you can say, policy so that they should learn more and we try to give our argument more clearly. Then it comes this very important thing, risk environment. Interestingly, in the risk environment, now it's a Professor Zamir Akram very accurately highlighted when he was making a comparison. Now here when they talk about the political stability, there is a political stability which is very much identical to Anglo-Saxon model, then there is a political stability in the United States or in other Western countries? There is a political critique is not on the political leadership in the other states? Everywhere where there is a democracy, there is a more, you can say, hue and cry. And as compared, I'm not talking about India, everyone knows about what has been happening in India since last 1 year. Just see the parliamentary debates, you would find that there is a more, and their parliamentarians saying what is happening in the India political instability. On this political stability is a very much, you can say, subjective, and developing state society, especially keeping in mind of the effective governance and political stability, that is not acceptable. And I think the NTI must take into account these kind of things. Then, of course, pervasiveness of corruption. I think at least whether we like it or not, the anti-corruption process on the ruling elite in Pakistan has been taking place. What is happening? If you see, our ex-president has been facing, our ex-prime minister has been facing, our current sitting chief minister was yesterday in the, what you call it, and the NAB. So against the corruption, there is a movement, there is a sensitivity, and then linking it that, oh, they see in the open sources that the corruption cases have been registered, the seasons have been taken place, but they are not taking into account that within the state system or within the state and society of Pakistan, process of what we call it anti-corruption process has been taking place. They must take into account, and they are simply ignoring that thing. And that is a debatable point, which I do not agree with this. That's why, and then of course, illicit activities by non-state actors. I think in this context, they have to take into the account, agreed, whatever they were talking about the AQ Khan network, but after the AQ Khan network, there are almost 15 years now. In the last 15 years, there is not even a single incident. And above all, what Pakistan has an achievement, everyone in the world has been now acknowledging this achievement, that Pakistan has destroyed the most lethal, you can say, terrorist, transnational terrorist organizations, I can say. And in that context, instead of taking that, when they say illicit activities by non-state actors, that where is we are standing today? And that was again a part and parcel when they started as a failure of the international community. Now, where, of course, apart from the critique, there is also areas where my understanding is, in my judgment, there's a need to work more. Of course, when we talk about the cybersecurity is our concern. And they have also acknowledged it, but there is a room for improvement. If you see today's newspaper reporting, what our, you can say, cyber countermeasures, and we identified that how the Indian RAW was trying to intervene and it was sabotaged, their actions were, you can say, prevented. So it means that this is an area, whether somebody acknowledge it, we are doing something or not, my understanding is that we should work more. And this is the area where we should work more, and that we should not take into this area lightly in this context. Second is security culture. Of course, the security culture is very important, because if you see in the context of Pakistan, the traits of subjective and parochial political culture are very much visible. And that's why you find it that participatory culture is lacking. But in the case of security culture, My understanding is that the security culture, especially with the nuclear, radiological and nuclear material or fissile material, Pakistan has a very strong security culture. That's why there is no any mentioning of any accident or incident. But we can record these kind, or there are many recorded incidents regarding the India. There are many incidents regarding the other states. But of course, but where I take my point here that the PRI and Human Responsibility Program, they are improving. But within the state, I think that our security culture has been gradually improving. We are acting as responsible individuals, and it will be further strengthened. And it has been, that's the reason that confidence of the Pakistani state and society, that you find more transparency in our many things. But anyway, one can say, and then the quantities of nuclear materials, of course, one cannot respond it. But at the same time, in the case of civilian program, we can respond it, but not in the military program, because as I said, that, and then comes the international legal commitments. Of course, Ambassador Saab has very rightly pointed out that we are trying to perform the international commitment, but if they treat us as a de jure nuclear weapon state, or if they can assign us some kind, or if they can include us, I think this is when we talk about the way forward. This is an area that where the international community expresses what we call it sensitivities regarding the international legal commitments, then they have to take into account that they should include us. Pakistan should be proactive instead of being a shy, to be proactive, to be part of MTCR, to be part of Australia Group, Wise Arrangement, Nuclear Supply Group, as we are already very much proactive in that case. Even this, what we call it, Hague Code of Conduct on the missiles, we should be proactive for that. If the international community wants that Pakistan should be respecting, Pakistan should be, of course, when I read the Pakistan's, all the, you can SecDiv's documents, we comply all these, you can say, guidelines, we comply with the EU guidelines, but at the same time, point here is, this is the area where we need to work hard and say that, okay, if you want us, then we should perform our duties well as a part of international regimes that include us in the international regime, and we qualify for that. Except this, if India can qualify, why not Pakistan can qualify? So here, I endorse my earlier speakers this point that they are too much concerned. So what is my final conclusion is, yes, we can celebrate academically, at the think tank level, in our writings, what has voted in this. But of course, there's no need to endorse it officially. And at the same time, we should remain vigilant and confident if the next, after 2 years, when they are going for the 6th NTI index, if they are trying to, or if they will twist some facts, we should be there to rectify. So we try to look from 2020 to 22 very systematically and sensibly this thing. So, and second is, my understanding here is that I do agree with this, that Pakistan's transparency and cooperative approach over nuclear security must be continued. Our Foreign Office, Arms Control, Disarmament, Division officers, responses or participation, I think that is a good thing to go from the first hand or these kind of things. Because normally what we have seen that when we are a little bit shy, they make out of it. And finally, we try to use this report as much as possible in our own advantage. Advantage is, A, where there is a room for improvement, we must go for the improvement. Number one. Number two advantage is that we continue, as Ambassador Zamir Akram pointed out, the areas which qualify that the analysis of this report or finding of this report was subjective. We identify those areas and be careful and cautious about it. And my third submission is, yes, we can maintain as much as possible about our transparency at the official, as the, you can say, academic, or you can say think tank level. And finally, we should be not shy. Pakistan is a nuclear armed state, and nobody can take away these arms because these are indigenously built capability, and we should go for establishing or more proactively to be part of nuclear regimes. I mean, these, whether you call it these cartels, technological cartels, or technological nuclear regimes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaspal, for a very candid analysis of the NTI Index Report 2020. I think SVI objectives have been, while we appreciate the expanded role of Pakistan in nuclear security and threat, we do not accept this report as an international standard or a criteria of how the country should behave or how the country should do that. In fact, this NTI has no authority of any nature over Pakistan. Pakistan is a sovereign state and has its own right to make its nuclear policies. It's in best interest, not because the NTI wants it, as Ambassador Zamir Akram has very pointed out. And Pakistan's own record in the nuclear security and safety index is much better than many countries that they are appreciating, including India. And they are appreciating it because they have a special relationship with India in that particular context. So our point was to highlight the fallacies of this report, which has been very brightly and very succinctly pointed out by Ambassador Zamir Akram and Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. And our objective is, I think, therefore, well served from that point of view. We know, wait for any questions. If there's a question answer session, Ahyousha, Sher Bano, should I hand over to you for any question? If there were any questions on the subject?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the first question is by Haris Bilal Malik, Research Associate at the SVI. His question is addressed to Ambassador Zamir Akram. What are your views about why Pakistan wants to be interested and never took the opportunity to review the NTI pre-published document, as many other countries review them?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat what
Yes,
Pakistan
sir.
did not want? Could you repeat the
What are
question?
your views regarding why Pakistan not seems to be interested and never took the opportunity to review the NTI pre-published document, as many other countries review the pre-published document given by the NTI?
Okay, so I think the answer lies in what I have said and what Dr. Jaspal has said. For Pakistan, nuclear safety and security are a national responsibility, and we do not consider ourselves answerable to any other entity, whether it is a government or whether it is a non-governmental organization. I think the avenue for communicating or exchanging views between NTI should be with a Pakistani NGO, not with the government of Pakistan. We, on issues of safety and security, deal with the International Atomic Energy Agency. That is it. And with the agency, we have, as you know, I'm sure, engaged in measures, our regulatory machine architecture, our physical protection measures are consistent with the IAEA's advisories contained in their infirks. So the reason, simply stated, is that we do not engage with the NTI as a government, because it is not a government entity, number one, and number two, we do not feel ourselves answerable to any other entity, whether it is a government or an NGO, when it comes to our national safety and security.
I fully endorse Ambassador Zamir Akram's point of view. We are not obliged to react to whatever the NTI Index Report says that, because their level is that of an NGO, not at the national level of the government of Pakistan. Ambassador, sorry, Dr. Jaspal, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. I fully endorse what it is said. The reason is that why Pakistan officially should not be engaged, because sovereign state engaged with sovereign state or any organization which is presented by the government. So if we engage with this, then we will be more, you can say, vulnerable to their criticism. But at the same time, when NTI itself is an NGO, why they are not engaging? There are Islam-based, you can say 3-4 institutes which are regularly, like SVI, regularly you are conducting exercises on the nuclear issues, debates, conferences, like Institute of Strategic Studies. So they can, for a review, a non-governmental organization should submit its pre-published review to these institutes, and they will return them, and then they can acknowledge it. So straight away, NTI, if it's approaching the government of Pakistan or demanding from any ministry of the Pakistan that they should review it, and then we will be trapped. We shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think agree. We all three agree on that. Sher Bano, before I ask you to take second question, we have a very prominent member of the SVI available on the panel, Lieutenant General Naeem Khalil Lodi. So can I invite General Lodi to make his
Yes, sir,
brief
yes,
points? So over to you, General Lodi.
Thank you very much, sir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And I think thank you very much for arranging this webinar, because laymen like us, they are much wiser after listening to what NTI is and how they operate. And I think you selected the best possible people, both Excellency Zamir Saab and Dr. Jaspal. They did justice with this subject. I had only two queries. One has been partially answered by Dr. Jaspal. The first was, I think Excellency can answer it, or whoever wants to, that do we have other organizations also like NTI, those who carry out assessment of the security of fissile materials and such like things? Especially, is there any sub-organization of IAEA doing this sort of thing at international level? One. And secondly, I endorse what Dr. Jaspal said, that we should make sure that from SVI, we must send a rejoinder. We can thank them also in the first half of the letter, and the second half we can give them our observations. These two things I wanted to add, and thank you very much for arranging all this. I think I have learned a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I think we'll make sure that we compile a report on behalf of the SVI, and we will interact with them on this but we will let it go. On your first question, I will request Ambassador Zamir Akram. He has been in various governmental positions, and he knows this subject much better than anybody else. Is there any other parallel organization which is issuing similar kind of reports or not? Ambassador Zamir Akram?
Well, nuclear safety and security is now become, or has been for some years, the buzzword around the international community, particularly the Western-dominated community. But in the most authoritative organization in this regard is, of course, and remains the IAEA. That is the organization with which we deal as an international organization and as a sovereign state. And they have different measures, and they have a series of information circulars relating to nuclear and safety and security, which we have complied with, etc., in terms of our physical security, personal reliability, regulatory architecture, transparency. All those things are something that we are complying with in conjunction with the IAEA. Now, in terms of of course, Western governments are also looking at this all the time, and in fact, funding a lot of the work that is being done. I have been a part in the recent past of two university-led discussions on a series of meetings over several years. One was by Stanford University and the other was by Howard, the Belfair Center, where they also dealt with, their focus, of course, in engaging with us was on nuclear safety and security, what we are doing. And all these people who are so-called authorities on outsider and insider threats, etc., were participants in these meetings. Whereas our focus in these meetings was, of course, on strategic stability and security in the region. So a lot of the work on this subject is also being done by some of these leading universities, and some of the professors at these universities have written a lot about the so-called insider and outsider or threats issue. Then there has been, of course, institutions in Washington, just take US, Stimson Center, Carnegie, the CSIS, all these institutions have at one point or another and continue to be involved in issues of nuclear safety and security, because as I said in the beginning, this is the key buzzword from their perspective. So a lot of people are working on this issue, but the NTI is the sort of, in a sense, the focal organization that periodically produces a report on the subject, whereas these institutions, think tanks, produce reports from time to time. There is also another institution called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which does a lot of work on this issue as well, and continues to focus on the issue of nuclear security.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's quite comprehensive. Sher Bano, please, next question.
Yes, sir. So the next question is from Irfan Ali. He's a research associate at the SVI. His question is addressed to Dr. Zafar Jaspal. What is the credibility of such kind of reports produced or made by so-called independent autonomous institutes such as NTI? Are these institutes not subject to influence by governments of respective countries?
Jaspal.
Thank you, sir. If you can focus on this, I can divide your question into two, you can say, parts. First is, such reports have an impact. Because if you see these reports that are used by opinion makers, published, and the opinion maker, like if there is a policies made by any government, in the Congress of the United States, they comment or they look up these kind of reports. And this, what we call it in a discourse, in a political, diplomatic discourse, these reports, these writings have a very significance. So that's why we cannot take them, you can say, lightly. We have to participate. And that, I think that was the reason it was recommended that the SVI should also send its own, you can say, rejoinder. That is number one. There is a significance. Second is, when you talk about this issue of that how you are trying to see it. Sorry, I forgot the second part. Can you repeat it?
Sher Bano, can you repeat the question?
Yes, sir. What is the credibility of such kind of report produced or made by so-called independent autonomous institutes such as NTI? Are these institutes not subject to influence by government?
I got it. Thank you. Sorry. When we talk about this, these institutes' credibility, we have to not forget any work, any think tank, when it is producing, especially in the social sciences sphere, it is very much, you can say, influenced by its own biases. It is very much influenced by the funders. It is very much influenced from where it is operating. So we cannot say that hard sciences or that the findings of these institutes are very much accurate. We can say to some extent objective. And especially when you talk about the NTI, or where they're getting the funding, it is based in Washington. And the primary focus of all the Washington-based institutes, in my understanding, is, and it must be like this, to cater to, you can say, promote the national interest of the United States. So why do we, and that is the reason that when any institute submit this kind of report, what we say, yes, we can accept this as an alternative view. It's a very much interesting to read, but if we think it's not acceptable, because, and that's the reason, Ambassador Zamir, Professor Cheema, and I was pointing out that the finding of this institute are very much in certain areas subjective. So that's the point.
I think I just add just one sentence that the NTI was basically funded by the Department of Atomic Energy of the United States of America. So you can imagine from where the total funding comes and how much influence they might have on how to set these kind of various indices. So that speaks volumes about that. Okay, next question, please.
The next question is by Arsim Tariq. He's a student, columnist, and CSS aspirant. His question is addressed to Mr. Ambassador Zamir Akram. His question is, what is meant identify the subjective and objective nature of the report, or how can you differentiate between the subjectivity or objectivity of the report?
Ambassador Zamir Akram.
Well, subjectivity of the report is that the findings are not based on any hard, indisputable, and undeniable facts. For instance, and subjectivity is a result of making judgments on such issues that cannot be quantified. For instance, as I mentioned in my presentation, when you give 70 points to India for political stability at a time when we all know what is happening in India, then that is for me a very subjective view of how India can be categorized as politically stable at a time when there are riots and what they are doing in Kashmir, and they are confronting Pakistan and China, and they have this nationality or citizenship law. All these things are going on. A lot of the reality about India is brushed under the carpet. A lot of people, perhaps even in Pakistan, don't know that apart from Kashmir, there are 16 insurgencies that are going on in India at this time and have been going on for at least 3 decades. The India, in the Assam, Mizoram, all these, there are in Bihar, UP, and West Bengal, there is a so-called Maoist insurgency. So these are factors that demonstrate the instability in India, but India still is given a high score, 70 out of 100, for political stability. That is what I mean by the subjectivity of this report and this assessment. That's just one example. There are many other examples that I can give you. For instance, nuclear commitments or regulatory commitments, international or global norms, as the heading is called. Now, in terms of global norms, you can see the track record of India and Pakistan and how these global norms have been violated consistently by India ever since 1974. When it conducted its first nuclear test, and then so many others. We don't have the time to go into each and every one of those things. But there again, my point is that Pakistan's track record is as good or as bad as India's. But India gets a score of 50, whereas Pakistan gets a score of 15. I think that the difference is too large. So this is what I mean, that this is all subjective. If it had to be objective, then you would have had to carry out, you were a student of international relations. If you look at the sort of the new approach to studying international relations is to try and quantify. Whether the quantification is correct or not, whether the yardsticks are correct or not, is another question about the theory of international relations. But that is that you pick up each and everything and you try and quantify how this can be done. Even that is hardly objective, but those are some of the measures that you can adopt to give greater objectivity to the outcome or to the conclusions that are made.
Thank you, Ambassador Zamir Akram. Sher Bano, any more questions?
No, sir, that's all from my side. No more questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think we conclude this session. I would say even, Professor Jaspal, do you want to conclude your remarks by another 2-3 minutes?
No, thank you very much, sir. I just simply added that we take this report and read it carefully and continuously see from where we can take the advantage. I mean that we can also further improve our own things. At the same time, how we use it in the, you can say, discourse or in this opinion making or in a propaganda, which is against us. To prevent that, we use this report. As number of times we say that prior to the 2016 Nuclear Security Summit, Arms Control Today, Carnegie, Balfour Center, their reporting was giving us a better rating of safety and security as compared to the other. So that is in a dialogue we can use it. And finally, we should not be shy of their critique, but at the same time, we should be very careful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Zamir Akram, would you have any more point to say, like to say something quickly?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I am profoundly thankful to both the panelists, distinguished panelists, Ambassador Zamir Akram and Professor Zafar Iqbal Jaspal. I am also thankful to General Lodi for making his brief comments. I'm also profoundly thankful to all the questioners who asked very useful, important questions and elevated the level of discussion. I'm also thankful to all the participants who found time out of their busy engagements and to be a part of this very important discussion on the subject. And I'm also thankful to all the members of the Ahyousha specifically for making a primer on the subject. I'm thankful to Sher Bano and all members of the SVI, Sadia, Kazmi, Zishan, Haris, Malak, and those who have contributed to make arrangements for this very important webinar on an important subject. So a lot of thanks from all of you. Thank you very much. Wish you good luck and see you again. Thank you.